Civil Affairs Office, morning. The little rubber stamp hits the paper with a sound that cracks like a verdict. Ink spreads into the paper's fibers, black, absolute. Outside the window, traffic hums indifferent, but in the cramped room, the stamp's echo is everything. A promise made official, a name bound to another name. Li Mengfei holds the glossy certificate with both hands as if it were a fragile bird. She is still in the same patched denim jacket she wore when she delivered packages for 6 months, but her cheeks are flushed with a new, bewildered pride. For weeks she has been moving through shock like water. One moment pushed into an elevator to sign a contract for Dongyao, the next swum through by a storm of relatives and whispered obligations, until she stands here, official and stunned. He remembers the ledger entries, the favors returned, the way alliances were brokered like commodities. He did not expect the ledger to be a person's life. Grandfather arranged it, the old man says. It had to be done quickly. Mengfei is... He searches for the word with the tenderness of a man who has loved a family's debt into gratitude. Reliable. Xilian bristles. There is a rumor of louder indignation in her expression than the room can bear. Where she is from, owed promises are not small things. They are contracts of respect. They are the currency of futures. Outside, someone snaps a camera, a flash that eats the edges of the room. The world catches them in the moment between decision and consequence. Office, morning, Guangda Group. Li Mengfei's first day at Guangda is a study in dissonance. The elevator dings and the lobby breathes glass. Sharp shoes click like a courtroom. She is ushered past a man with a gold watch and a woman with a laugh that seems to be a prearranged announcement. When they say welcome, it lands as if rehearsed. She knows the company by rumor and by the brand on the courier labels she's carried. A house of power, of deals veiled in invitation-only dinners, and men who speak only in the measurements of distance between spreadsheets and souls. Mengfei's hands still smell faintly of perfume tape. She moves like someone who has never been trained to avoid embarrassment. Her apologies come quickly, her smile quick to follow. Zhang Yuanyuan meets her with a practiced smile that hides the blade. Zhang is everything Mengfei is not. Glossy, networked, fluent in the language of elevator pitches and private reservations. She eyes Mengfei's clothes with the kind of judgment that is its own small economy. "Do you need help finding the restroom?" she asks, which could be charity or an assessment, depending which way the wind blows at a private table. Helen Shen, assistant Shen, takes a different view. He is the kind of aide who has learned the curtsy of being efficient. He watches Mengfei more like a head of security than like a colleague. His eyes weigh her differently. He has seen the company crumble under petty rivalries and knows when a new piece on the board is actually a knucklebone of something larger. He walks Mengfei to her station and gives a nod that is short, protective, and practical. Fu Yunxing upsoats them all with the patience of someone who sits on the ridge between personal and public. He can read a room the way others read pages. His attention flickers to Mengfei not because she is in his orbit, but because she has become the axis the family has spun into his evening. He watches her move through the office like someone cataloging a future unfamiliar to him. The Dongyao file arrives like a comet. Chairman Feng's name is ink across the contract, old capital and the scent of opportunity. Dongyao is not just a client, it is a headline. The team gathers, voices tight with the pressure of being visible. Mengfei learns the company's rhythm by being asked to do the impossible: locate a misfiled clause, reformat a pitch, track down a shipment detail that everyone else assumes is already handled. She answers each call-out with a kind of plain efficacy that irks the slicker executives. Why is she not flustered? Why does she not defer? Her competence reads as an affront. When the chairman calls drunk but impressed, he catapults her reputation with the careless power of the wealthy. He tells the story later as if it were a minor anecdote, the girl who found the clause everyone missed. He pats backs and simpers, and in an hour the rumor becomes currency. Someone jokes at a party about the delivery girl who can read Gray's clauses. Mengfei brushes off delivery girl like a sleeve. She is both amused and alarmed by the suddenness. She would rather be competent than legendary. Backstage, Xilian watches the quiet transfer of favor as if she is witnessing a theft. The ledger has shifted without her consent. She moves through the office now with a new strategy: proximity. She attaches herself to power the way others might to a life jacket. She laughs at jokes that are thin, touches sleeves with fingers that seek to remember the feel of influence. Her voice colors conversations like a second lipstick. She calls her agent, her mother, an old friend who used to be an ally. Each conversation is a step in a ladder she intends to climb. "I will not be invisible," she says, and the words have the weight of a decree. She expects apology by way of title, and perhaps the rehabilitation of the promised ring. Instead, she is offered corporate courtesy and a polite deflection. "Titles don't make a marriage," Fu says once, too faint for He Lian's ears but perfectly audible to the space between them. The phrase drifts like a thrown object that finds a wall. He doesn't mean to hurt her. He means only to define boundaries. He is not yet measuring her with desire. He is measuring her with consequence. She hears the lack like a rancid perfume. First many anchor. Stay with it. If this story is speaking to you, stay for the next stretch. The promise of a stamp and the rip of a life split open is only the beginning. Family dinner. Evening. Fu residence. Grandfather Fu eats his dinner like someone polishing a relic. He has orchestrated more marriages than anyone else in the room, and the table creaks with the weight of his past handiwork. The family's conversation grazes around obligations. A marriage is a ledger, and a ledger can be mended with the right signatures. He calls it restoration. To him, Mengfei is a sound solution. Modest, grateful, a peace offering to neighbors and to ceremonies long due. Across the table, He Lian slides through the sentences of her childhood, of being promised as an exchange, of sacrifices made by her family to advance their station. She paints the memory in strokes that are precise and bitter.
"My family did not send me across oceans to be forgotten in a signature," she tells the room, and the bit of truth in it lands unevenly on the tablecloth. Fu Yunxing drinks green tea and watches both women the way someone watches a chessboard that has been rearranged mid-game. He can feel the pressure of tradition, but also the friction of something else, his own fatigue at being married by default before his life had a chance to form. The family whispers about practicalities, alliances, profiles, press releases. The words sound like architecture, practical, designed to hold weight. Li Mengfei lies awake that night with the unpredictable electricity of newness. She thinks about the contract she signed and the way the Dongyao team applauded her. She thinks about her mother who cooked a simple soup and told her to be careful around rich people. They move like the weather, her mother had said once, and Mengfei had pocketed the metaphor the way one pockets a banknote, both skeptical and ready to spend. He Lian walks the city in a coat that shields her, but the city does not hide its teeth. Neon reflects in her sunglasses. She moves through clubs that smell of perfume and borrowed time, houses with terrace gardens that hum with absentee fortunes. At night, she goes to the places where people like her are both admired and consumed. She wants to be seen not as an option, but as a necessity. When the world refuses to serve that script, she sets the table for her own appetite. Workplace pressure, week 2. Guangda's corridors begin to feel like a pressure cooker that leaves fingerprints on everyone it touches. Mengfei's name is whispered and then punched into PX systems. She receives a desk near the sales floor, as if proximity will imbue her with institutional warmth. Her promotion to a junior role in client relations is hailed as a miracle by some and as a provocation by others. Zhang Yanyuan keeps her smile the bandwidth of a blade. She starts a rumor slowed to a drip. Mengfei slept on a bench outside the building. Mengfei once bought a one-way bus ticket to get here. Mengfei is an unacceptable variable in a table that measures risk. She suggests that Mengfei's ascent is owed not to merit, but to spectacle. The assassination is not public, it is surgical, administered by gossip and envy. Fu Yunxing, by contrast, approaches Mengfei with the wary politeness of a man who has been told what to do and is deciding whether to do it gracefully. Conversations between them are careful stitches. He asks the right questions about the Dongyao clause. He corrects the phrasing in a report with a soft authority. Mengfei is at once flattered and frustrated by his distance. She wants clarity, not posture. When a senior director questions Mengfei's presence in a Thursday meeting, why is she here? Fu defends her in a way that is practical more than knightly. She found the clause. That is useful, he says.
The sentence is a puzzle piece that clicks not into romance, but into an office ledger, where usefulness often translates into longevity. Mengfei hears it as a small victory and a challenge. She must prove she is useful long after the applause dies. He Lian watches this from the periphery, and a bruise of envy builds into a strategy. She begins to circulate in circles that can influence reputations: charity galas, private consultancies, late-night salons where men trade in introductions like merchandise. There she finds men with the kind of attention she can polish into something that equals marriage: celebrities who throw parties, patrons who own entire floors of buildings, influencers who can make a person into a narrative. She makes an accountant an ally, a boutique owner a friend, the kind of contacts that generate headlines when necessary. She is doing nothing more scandalous than arranging for the world to remember her. Memory, in this city, can be bought with the right account number and the right guest list. A quiet moment, rooftop, late night. In the city's quiet above the noise, Fu Yunxing finds a place between duty and impulse. He watches the lights like a man trying to read tide marks on a beach he keeps visiting. He does not know how to translate the neat arithmetic of corporate kindness into the messy vocabulary of care. He thinks of promises as lines written in a ledger, and then finds those lines crossing with people who do not behave like numbers. He thinks of Mengfei, who carries competence in her hands the way others might carry a ruined jewel. He thinks of Li, of a woman who expected to be remembered and finds she was not. For a moment he considers whether forgetting is always a sin or sometimes a mercy. Club, late night, set up. Li circles the club like a comet that has been trained onto a new orbit. The lights here are cruel and flattering in equal measure. Perfume hangs like trade winds. She is not here to dance. She is here to be seen by the right people, to connect names to faces the way one matches vertices on a graph. She wears a gown that speaks of foreign purchases and of a confidence tempered in flight. Men approach with wine on their tongues and proposals of infinitesimal kindnesses. Women measure her with the ancient arithmetic of comparison. She wants something more urgent than a title now. The stamp on the marriage certificate no longer suffices. The ledger has been rearranged, and the new mathematics is appetite. She sets her plan in motion the way a strategist sets pawns: a whispered invitation to an influencer with access to the city's elite, a reserved corner table for a small private event, a subtle suggestion that Mengfei might be found wanting, enough public pressure to force a reaction. She imagines being admired for turning what the world forgot into something it envies. Li Mengfei is invited to the same event by a well-meaning colleague who thinks a night out in a safe circle will help Mengfei shake off the strain of being new. She accepts with hesitation, and then with the same practical bravery she brings to contracts. "I will go just to understand the other side," she tells her friend Chuan, who worries out loud and makes jokes to cover the worry. Assistant Shen briefs his mind like a map. "Take care," he tells Mengfei, more as instruction than as sentiment. He is not romantic in his concern, he is logistical. He arranges for Mengfei to have a ride home, a steady point of contact. In his chest compares the company's liability against personal morality and lands on the side of protection. Li watches these preparations like the conductor before a crescendo. She does not intend to commit a crime, she intends to stage a spectacle. She imagines Mengfei's moment of embarrassment and the applause that will follow, an old-fashioned theater of revenge. She has rehearsed it in rooms where women discuss their grievances with the same pragmatic ferocity as a CEO outlines a merger. The night begins. Neon slices the air into colored moods. The club breathes heat, and the music amplifies its own heartbeat. Guests arrive like donations presented in human form. Mengfei slips into the room as if she is entering a new country, alert, polite, an immigrant to elite norms. Fu Yunxing is not present. He has a meeting that keeps him in another hemisphere of the city's hours. That absence is a fissure Li intends to exploit. For Mengfei, the night is a series of small tests. Can she hold a flute of champagne without spilling it? Can she translate a joke into the club's humor? Can she carry her simple earnestness through a room made of curves and cunning? She offers her smile and listens. A man too intent on flattering her asks about her background. She answers plainly and with a dignity that is unarmed and therefore disarming. He stops himself from asking the next, crueler question. Li watches, notebooks of names tucked into a clutch like talismans. She orders drinks, not for herself, but to be in the act of generosity. Patronage as power. The club drinks are sweetened poison in name only, but power smells like dessert here. She moves through the room making the right impressions. She is building a case. To be remembered is to be undeniable. To be undeniable is to be indispensable.
The air begins to tighten with an undercurrent that is both expectation and trap. People orbit the planned spectacle without knowing which of their gestures will be ammunition. A man smiles at Mengfei the way someone might smile at a fragile animal. A friend offers her a drink with a certain offhanded helpfulness, and scene patterns start to align the way stars do before an eclipse. From the periphery, Assistant Shen's twitch is a compass needle diverted.
He keeps an eye on the corners in a way that suggests he is not referencing threat but procedure. He notes who offers drinks, who positions themselves near exits, whose laughter is too loud. He is not yet alarmed, but he is alert. He Shilian's plan moves from fantasy to implementation with the unhurried patience of a woman who has learned to convert slightness into strategy. She is not cruel for the sake of cruelty. Her ambition is older, deeper than the applause. She was promised a place at the table and found only an empty chair. The world's forgetting has become a hunger she intends to feed, even if the meal is bitter. Mengfei laughs at a joke someone tells, and the sound becomes a bell in He Shilian's memory. For a moment, He Shilian sees herself in Mengfei's smile, the way a mirror can reveal someone you thought only reflected you. She tightens her jaw. For the first time, she feels a twinge of something that is not pure resentment, something like recognition or envy that tastes like something darker. The room pulses in a way that compresses minutes into the density of a second. A tray of drinks approaches, the type passed with the casual intimacy where accidents happen. The scene is a choreography of proximity and pretense. Conversations skim surfaces, hands brush, names are introduced like currency. He Shilian orders a particular bottle, something with a reputation for generosity. The action is small but deliberate. She will be the benefactor who creates the flashpoint. In her mind, embarrassment will realign the ledger. Mengfei is handed a glass and raises it with a polite nod to the group. She does not suspect malice. She has not been trained to see the architecture of social ruin. Her smile is wide, open. The camera of the club, the real cameras and those living in phones, tilt to catch the tableau. Spilled light scatters into 1,000 little judgments. A hand on her elbow. A stranger's hand touches Mengfei's elbow, as if to escort her. The contact is casual, social, reasonable. She turns, polite, and offers a smile that invites conversation, not caution. From the doorway, He Shilian watches the micro-moment like a director assessing her actors. The grip on vengeance is steady. This is not what she wanted at first. This is what the world gives her instead. The plan makes sense because of a ledger that once promised her repayment in intimacy, and instead paid debt in expedience. Assistant Shen notices the exchange too late to intervene, but he steps forward anyway, the way someone goes to lift a fouling glass, because even small kindnesses feel like rescue. He is the kind of man who understands the difference between being loyal and being heroic. He chooses loyalty first. And then, just as the night seems to have reached the tight spot in its design, someone pulls at a sleeve. A commotion begins like a cup of water tipping. Voices rise a notch. A man near the entrance laughs too loudly. Cameras pan. The energy thickens. In the hallway, Fu Yunxing receives a call and pauses, his silhouette a cutout against the city's window. He is not yet aware of the thread someone has tied and is about to pull. He Shilian breathes, and for an instant she imagines victory as clear as the stamp on that morning's certificate, public acknowledgement, the sight of Mengfei embarrassed, and the world aligning back into the ledger she believes in. She has rehearsed the exact arc of the humiliation. A glass spilled, a whispered joke, an apology suffocated by laughter, headlines that will remind everyone who she was. But plans do not account for the surprising clearness of someone's courage. She does not schedule for the way Assistant Shen moves when his moral compass clicks, nor for the way simple, unpracticed dignity glows under threat. She has not allowed for the possibility that being forgotten could lead Mengfei to a different type of desire altogether, the desire for respect, for a voice, for the kind of agency that is not given on a platter, but earned in the small, precise acts of everyday survival. The room tightens around the small explosion of noise. A glass tips, the sound of shattering is a punctuation, and people lean in the way audiences lean toward a scene. Eyes narrow, phones are lifted. This is a precipice where gestures multiply into meaning. He Shilian smiles, briefly, because she believes the sequence will produce exactly what she needs: visibility, pity for her, power regained. She does not yet understand that the world sometimes punishes those who aim to punish others. She does not yet know that the very exposure she seeks might illuminate a different ledger, one that tallies consequence beside memory. From the bar, a man offers another drink, and the room's air becomes a rumor. The incline of people's voices shifts, and the night migrates toward an edge.
A hand reaches for her coat. Someone reaches for Mengfei's coat to steady her. The movement could be kind or castrating, protective or appropriative. It is a touch that writes intent in the space between two people, and the meaning is not yet clear. Xilian watches this with the impatient satisfaction of someone who believes they have placed a mirror in front of the world. But the mirror sometimes shows more than the actor plans. For Mengfei, the touch is received with a steadiness that is not fear but measured courtesy. For Assistant Shen, it is an alarm bell that sends him into action. At the doorway, Fu Yunxing stands frozen like someone who has misread his train stop. He could step into the scene and change the ledger in an instant. His presence would convert the humiliation into an awkwardness quickly mopped by authority. He thinks of family, of reputation, of 1,000 arithmetic reasons to avoid entanglement. He thinks of promises made in ink, and promises made by people. The night tilts. Xilian steps forward, not to stop what she has begun, but to direct it from a point closer to the flame.
The world she knew, where promises are enforced by visibility and memory, is aligning with her intention. She wants not only to remove the imagined slight, but to replace it with a spectacle that will make the world remember her, preferably for the rest of its gossip-laden days. Mengfei steadies herself, a small human act. She does not perform for the room. She remains essentially herself, alert, resilient, politely brave in the face of magnified attention. The movement reads differently to different people. For some, it is fragility. For others, it is a quiet courage that will cause them to reassess the currency of their contempt. The tension curves like a drawn bow. The moment is about to release. And then the elevator clicks as someone leaves, a small noise, a hinge of time, and everything that has been set in motion waits on a single inhalation. The door to the club opens with a gust of air that smells like perfume and expectation. From the street, a figure approaches, wrapped in a coat that hides intent and perhaps also regret. The plan is about to enter its decisive phase. Club, late night. The club exhales a low wave of sound, light fractures across faces. The moment tautens like a string pulled too far. A champagne flute shatters quietly at a table not far from where Mengfei stands, and the noise lands like punctuation. Someone shouts a laugh that sounds too loud for the circumstance. Phones lift, the room tilts toward spectacle. Mengfei feels a cool pressure in her temple, and the world slows into rounded edges. She blinks, and the neon softens. A waiter offers another glass with a practiced smile. She lifts it because manners are the small art she still knows how to perform. For a second, she feels dizzy, then steadier. The laughter feels distant, as if behind glass. Assistant Shen notices the change in emotion that is both professional and humane. He steps closer, the map of his responsibilities tightening into a single point. Watch, protect, act. "Are you all right?" he asks, voice lowered. Mengfei smiles in reply, the polite smile that can be worn like armor. "I'm fine," she says, but the syllables do not reach quite all the way out. A man brushes past her with too much familiarity. Fingers graze her shoulder. She steps back without wanting to make a scene. From the corner, Xilian watches the tableau as if timing a performance. Her plan has slipped the borders of rehearsal and entered the messy unpredictability of live action. She has not wanted anyone to get hurt, only embarrassed, only exposed. But the night is now a thing that refuses tidy control. Her pulse thuds in a rhythm that is almost pleasure. She is near the scene she choreographed. But there is an edge she hadn't predicted. Perhaps it is how Mengfei's eyes look clear even while the room blurs. Perhaps it is the way Assistant Shen's jaw sets like steel. The mirror she expected to break instead reflects a woman who will not be made small. "Come on," someone says, too close to Mengfei. There is no menace in their voice, only opportunism. That's what makes it worse. Assistant Shen moves like a man who has rehearsed how to interrupt a potential hazard. He steps in front, places his palm near the offending hand, channeling the situation into a legal, company-shaped wedge. "You should leave her be," he says without anger, which is often more disarming than any fury. The man laughs, a thin sound that would be dangerous if not so brittle. He steps back, pushed by circumstance if not by conscience. The moment eases, nearly. Xilian exhales in a way she does not intend to broadcast. The plan, it seems, will play out as she wrote it. But the club is a living thing.
It has corners of unpredictability and people who carry their own small cruelties. A scuffle begins at another table, an argument over a spilled drink. People gather, cameras swivel. The energy migrates toward drama like moths to a candle. In the commotion, a tray slips near Mengfei. Glasses topple. The sound is the kind that makes time go brittle. Someone grabs her elbow to steady her, an act that can be read as protective or possessive, depending on the reader. Assistant Shen reacts automatically, separating the hands with the quiet force of someone who believes clear boundaries are a form of care. A man pushes past them. Someone yells. In the press of bodies, He Shilian is shoved aside, and her ankle catches the lip of a step. She stumbles and falls, the top of her hand striking the floor hard enough to make her breath snag. A hush, then a ripple of concern. It is clumsy, immediate, humiliating. People gather to help the woman who had intended to stage humiliation, and in the instant the world leans toward her, the ledger she wanted to tilt tilts a different way. He Shilian sits on the step, palm already cold with shock. Her thigh blooms with a hot, stinging pain that is not in itself dramatic, only sharp and real. Someone offers a hand up. She accepts. The fall becomes an image, a woman in a foreign gown, winded, vulnerable. Cameras turn. A murmur begins to make itself into a headline. The brief accidental tableau complicates everything. The cameras capture He Shilian on the floor while a paramedic, on-call staff at such venues, moves toward Mengfei, who now sways and collapses into Assistant Shen's arms. The club empties toward that center of emergency like a slow tide. There is no cinematic climactic assault. There is only the gravity of a body that has stopped responding. Mengfei's lips are pale. Her font of dignity does not abandon her. She tries to joke, to make the moment smaller for everyone's sake. But the words tangle. Someone screams and the club becomes a place of edges. Security pushes toward the exit. Shouts are more panicked. Phones are raised to record. The lights seem too bright, intrusive. Assistant Shen calls for an ambulance with a voice that is all practiced procedure.
He supports Mengfei gently, his motions a kind of careful choreography learned under a long list of unglamorous duties. Fu Yunxing, who is outside the city chambers at a meeting that seems to stretch the universe, receives a call just as the conversation moves to its final points. He listens to the voice on the line, Shen's voice, clipped and precise, and the world constricts into a purer focus. He makes a decision that is less of a moral gesture and more of a practical calculation. He is needed. He ends the meeting and leaves. The ambulance arrives like an authority. The attendants are brisk but tender. Mengfei is lifted onto a stretcher with a kindness that is not theatrical. He Exilian moves towards the paramedics and is supported by someone who does not yet know whether the fall was performative or accidental. She feels the eyes of the club on her like an inventory. For a second, the ledger she has chased and the human cost of chasing it collide in a way that is dizzying. Outside, the night air is sharp and cold. The ambulance doors close. Mengfei is inside, consciousness fogging and then brightening like a faulty lamp. Assistant Shen climbs in, his authority softening into accompaniment. He holds her hand as if to tether her to soundness, and in that simple contact there is an ethic, protection without patronage. He Exilian watches the ambulance doors close with a sensation that is not triumph. It is not even revenge. It is a deeper, more hollow thing, an echo of the life she imagined that now misaligns with the shape of consequence. For a moment she is dizzy from adrenaline and thought. The plan that should have sown victory instead sows confusion. Hospital. Dawn. White light is not gentle. The fluorescent hum of the ER behaves like a mechanical chorus. Nurses move with the efficiency of those trained to optimize minutes. Mengfei is monitored, her pulse steadying under the careful commands of IV lines and warm blankets. The doctors speak in clinical tones that make the night shrink into a few measurable risks. Blood work, observation, a night in the ward. Nothing dramatic, but not nothing non-consequential either. The diagnosis reads like careful sympathy. Reaction to an unknown substance, dehydration, acute disorientation. Treatment follows. Assorted people hover in the waiting room like a patchwork of loyalties. Assistant Shen paces with the measured energy of a man who waits through systems, not drama. Chuan sits beside him, fidgeting in that friendly, open way that tries to make the scene less tight. When Fu arrives, quiet, late, bearing the kind of authority born of both proximity and obligation, he moves through them with a restrained force. His face is the same sculpted composure he keeps in the office, but something has softened behind his eyes. He Exilian appears shortly after, leaving footprints of silk and anxiety. She has her hand wrapped and a bandage that reads to the world as an injury proof. Internally, she knows it as a bruise that does what pride hates most. It exposes vulnerability. A camera flashes at a distance. A reporter's lens has followed the ambulance and now loops the perimeter. "We'll wait with you," Fu says to Mengfei, in a tone that is at first protocol. Then, as the minutes pass and the hum of the hospital becomes a room unto itself, the politeness loosens into something that resembles human concern. "How are you feeling?" Mengfei, finally lucid and stubbornly practical, answers with the small sentences she uses to keep herself steady. Tired, thirsty, embarrassed. Her cheeks flame with the shame of someone who has been laid bare in a public arena. Xilian drifts close enough to hear and far enough to keep a polite distance. She has come because the spectacle she started now frames her in multiple roles: engineer of a social moment, accidental victim of the same, woman with a hurt hand. She has not come to apologize. Not yet. The old script would have demanded the dignity of silence. But the handcuffs of silence are not comfortable to everyone. The hospital's rumor mill starts grinding quickly. The club's influencer accounts have uploaded frames: Mengfei collapsing, Xilian on the floor, several hands reaching. The internet spins, and the story becomes an argument in pixels. Who staged what? Who fell? Who was harmed? The public reaction is immediate. Some voices blame Xilian. Others insist on sympathy for someone injured. Some treat Mengfei with a surprising tenderness. President Fu's grandfather phones. The old man's voice is small in the echo of the hospital corridor. "What happened?" he asks, not with the authority of someone demanding accounting, but with the tremor of someone who suddenly feels the weight of decisions. The grandfather's past maneuverings, marriages arranged, debts balanced, now seem to gather like clouds. He is not a man who enjoys uncertainty. Later that morning, in a glassed conference room that smells faintly of lemon and decisions, Fu summons the senior team. Chairman Fang sits with the kind of amused distance that men with reputations like his cultivate. He sips tea and watches events as if they were chess pieces moved by someone else's hand. The Danya file moves in and out of conversation, as if the contract itself can endure the eddies of scandal. "We cannot have this circus adjacent to our clients," an executive intones. The words are careful. The calculation is simple. Risk to the deal must be minimized. Fu listens. Beyond the corporate ledger, he is thinking of a woman in a hospital bed who was not merely a line item in a family obligation. His decision moves in two registers: protect the company, and, more quietly, protect the people who have been entangled by family choices. He makes a move that surprises some. He orders an internal inquiry into the club incident, not just the public relations angle. "We need facts," he says, "not speculation." When the security footage from the club is examined, a clean, inevitable thing happens. What Xilian intended to do, introduce a pressure that would embarrass Mengfei, appears as a pattern on the tape. It is not a smoking gun for a single felony, but it is sufficient to show intent. She is seen positioning herself, engaging with the server involved in the tray, directing the line of proximity. The fall she suffered is captured as a stumble during an attempt to move forward. The internet, patient with drama, loops the frames into 1,000 judgmental interpretations. Public relations work begins, as it always does, in the attempt to soften edges. Press statements circulate. Xilian's handlers, if they can be called that, ask for privacy, for healing, for the removal of judgment. Simultaneously, a chorus of voices on social media pushes for accountability. The law does not move with the fast fury of the internet. It moves like an institution. Police receive statements, not because there is a straightforward crime, but because parties are concerned about negligence and the use of substances in a club setting. The scandal rearranges loyalties. Zhang Yuan distances herself from the affair with a careful set of social posts that read as consolation for others and not as reflection. Some of Xilian's late-night allies, men who once treated association as an investment, withdraw when the risk to their own brands become visible. Memory, it seems, is as elective as any social contract. At the office, Fu makes a move that reveals his own axis. He insists that Mengfei be given time to recover, and when the Dongyao team calls to ask if the contract will be stable, he answers in a way that folds personal judgment into professional authority.
She secured us Dong Yao's attention, he says. We will not abandon that competence because the world prefers spectacle. It is a small, steady defense. It is not romantic fanfare. It is corporate backbone. He Xilian watches the shifting alliances and feels a different type of hunger, not for attention this time, but for repair. The wound of being forgotten, of losing a promised future, reveals itself as more than pride tinged by ambition. It is a loneliness built on expectation, the kind of loneliness that can be very loud. Hospital room. Later. Mengfei wakes slowly to the feel of a hand on her wrist. It is Assistant Shen's hands, warm and secure. Chan sits nearby, eyes ringed with tiredness and fierce, uncomplicated sympathy. A nurse checks vitals and leaves them with an "I'll be right back" that is both a professional promise and a human one. Fu enters quietly, bringing a thermos of something that smells like strong tea. He does not sit. He stands near the window and watches the hospital's soft daylight.
"You were very brave," he says, in a tone that feels less like praise and more like recognition. Mengfei considers that phrase. Brave is a heavy clasp. She thinks of the kitchen where her mother taught her to keep small dignity in tough times, of long rides between towns carrying packages, and the practiced courtesy that kept her work from feeling paltry. "I was scared," she says, "but people were kind." Kindness is also a form of courage, Fu replies. Their conversation is short and practical. Reports to be filed, statements to be given, the need to not leap into conclusions before facts. But beneath the arrangement, there is a softer filament where feelings curl like young vines. He watches her hands, noting the small swell at the knuckles where the IV is taped, and wonders at the architecture of someone who can be both fragile and durable. He Xilian stands at a doorway that separates care from consequence. She has come to check on Mengfei, and the sight of the woman she tried to humiliate incites something like shame in her. It is not a cathartic, cinematic horror of guilt. It is a small, private reorganization, like opening a drawer and finding something you forgot you owned. She approaches slowly and speaks in a measured voice. "I'm sorry," she says, not to publicize an apology, not to craft a headline, but because the word seems adequate to the immediate moment. Mengfei looks up, surprised at the simplicity of the confession. "It was stupid," He Xilian adds. "My pride, it hurt people," Mengfei completes, with a kindness that is neither theatrical nor indulgent. She looks at He Xilian as someone who has seen a mirror smashed and is now gluing fragments back together. "You're hurt too." The exchange is thin and fragile. It does not erase the events. It does not rearrange everything back into the ledger He Xilian had imagined, but it is a start. He Xilian, who has been trained to measure her worth in attention, finds herself flummoxed by the smallness of the admission. It does not make the world forget. It does not make the promised marriage appear. It is not a salve for all wounds. Elsewhere, a set of private messages and a security log reshuffle reputations. Someone in the club staff, irritated by management's indifference and wanting to clear their conscience, sends footage to a reporter.
A source becomes a story. Lawyers whisper about negligence. The cocktails with questionable ingredients are no longer anonymous. The club owner faces fines and a PR crisis. There are consequences that move through the gears of institutions in the way one pulls a lever and feels the rung shift. Office, midday. Guangda's office buzzes with a new frequency, rumor and consequence. Some staff members whisper in corners. Some record their own narratives for safety. Some turn their faces away from the spectacle.
Zhang Yunyuan's memes of superiority lose their sheen when a senior partner, long irritated by gossip and disloyalty, reminds the team of reputations built on work and not on social sabotage. The Dong Yao contract, having been at risk of collapse, stabilizes due to Fu's advocacy and Mengfei's competence. Chairman Fang's calculus is simple. Competence matters, and reliability is rare. When he hears that Mengfei insisted on transparency, that she refused to capitalize on the limelight, and instead asked for due process, he is impressed. Good people are like that, he tells Fu, in a message that carries weight beyond praise. That momentum yields a promotion, not a grand title that buys headlines, but a formalization of Mengfei's responsibilities. She is given the client liaison portfolio for Dong Yao, a role that is more accountable than glamorous. It is precisely the kind of opportunity that suits someone who wants to be useful. She and Fu sign the paperwork in a small office, where the light falls on the documents like a benediction. The gesture is quiet. The meaning is large. He Shilian watches the movement of the company and its rewards with a new kind of hunger, the hunger of someone who senses a table she wanted to sit at has rearranged itself without consulting her. She is not entirely surprised that promoters and hosts who once flattered her now sidestep her. The man who purchased visibility with a ledger now finds that the ledger works against him when its pages are made public. Grandfather Fu calls He Shilian into his study. He is older than anyone remembers, and the lines around his eyes seem more carved by worry than by years. He does not scold her in the loud manner she might have expected. Instead, he speaks in the slow language of consequences. You were promised a place, he says, and you were given the wrong one at the wrong time. That does not make what you did right. He Shilian listens. The enormity of the promise she carried, family favors, reciprocal expectations, sits between them like a ledger open to pages that will never be fully reconciled. I wanted to be seen, she says, and the statement is not theatrical so much as a brittle confession. I wanted someone to remember. You were remembered, the old man replies, but not the way you expected. Her world narrows into a point that is not entirely catastrophic. The promise of marriage is not recovered, the family's whispers become cautious, sponsors move to maintain distance. Yet there is also an unexpected window. Without the binding of expectation, He Shilian can begin to define herself by choice rather than by obligation. The idea lands like a cool cloth on a fevered brow, comforting if uninviting. Consequence and choice. News cycles churn, the close closes for investigation. Dong Yao proceeds. Zhang Yunyuan finds herself in a precarious social position when colleagues push back against toxic gossip. She experiences fallout in the form of lost influence, a scolding from legal, and a subtle drain of senior partners' invitations. The workplace, usually a theater of quiet cruelties, begins to audit itself. He Shilian's social network frays, her late-night friends, whose alliances once bankrolled her visibility, begin to consider the calculus of association. The men who offered her access require assurances she cannot give, that she will remain an asset, not a liability. The ledger they thought they could manage grows complicated. Some withdraw, others offer platitudes. She receives a call from an old sponsor who offers an ambiguous promise. Come to our event, and we can discuss a pathway to status. He Shilian recognizes the offer. It is a trade masked as charity. She is tempted. Desire, after all, is not only for people, but for positions and the validation they bring. In the hum of the aftermath, He Shilian faces three paths. She can double down, pursue a new patron, and rebuild reputation via someone else's capital. She can recede, accept that being forgotten left scars she must heal, and withdraw into a quieter life where pain can be managed. She can reconstruct, take the skills she used to buy attention and hone them ethically, use the gift of networking to build something of her own. Her choice is not instantaneous. It is a series of small refusals and acceptances. She tries the old ways first, calls a manager, secures a dinner, tries a new influencer. The dinner's taste of strategic blandness. The man who once seemed a solution now feels like an equation with missing variables. She receives applause but feels nothing behind it. Then she steps into a small room above a cafe where a friend runs an incubator for small retailers and artisans. The air smells of espresso and possibility. A woman with ink-stained fingers gestures to sample layouts and suggests that Li use the talent she always cultivated, arranging people, curating attention, for something that is not self-consuming. "We need someone who understands introductions," the woman says. "We need someone who can help local designers find buyers without losing their craft." Li listens. The proposition is practical, not glamorous. It does not promise a headline, it promises work. She thinks of the stamp in the Civil Affairs Office, and how different ink can be when pressed by purpose rather than by obligation. She says yes, tentatively. The word feels unusual in her mouth, because when she accepted a yes as a child, it had always been a conduit to marriage or title. This new path is neither immediate redemption nor a platinum fix. It is simply a decision to redirect the machinery of her ambition towards creating value rather than extracting visibility. It is not exactly a romantic desire. It is a desire for competence and meaning. She begins late nights building pitches, learning how to listen to makers who have been dismissed by the same cities that once courted her. There is humility in the work, and slowly something like pleasure returns. Low, durable. A confrontation. Office corridor. Li meet Li Mengfei in a corridor that smells faintly of lemon polish and recycled air. It is a brief exchange, free from cameras. The staff pass them with the careful neutrality offices teach people who have seen too much spectacle. "I wanted to say it in private," Li tells Mengfei, and there is a steadiness in her voice that is new. Mengfei, still soft from the hospital bed, but wry with a resilience born of having been through worse than humiliation, meets Li's gaze. "Thank you for saying it," she replies. "I don't know if it fixes anything. It helps." There is no grand reconciliation. There is a quietness of two women recognizing each other's small economies of pain and pride. Li offers to help in the incubator she now works with, an offer without strings, and Mengfei accepts in the way one accepts a bridge when the weather is good. It is, at best, a start. Fu watches from his office with an economy of motion. He has choices too. He can let the ghost of arranged obligation haunt his decisions forever. He can maintain a life dictated by ledger and legacy. Or he can acknowledge that human beings are rarely adequately met by contracts. He begins to choose the human, sporadically and imperfectly. He visits the incubator once to deliver a short talk on corporate ethics and how companies should not mistreat people under their influence. His presence is careful, not performative. Over time, his exchanges with Mengfei move from cautious to genuine. They share small jokes about spreadsheets and the oddity of office coffee. It is not fireworks, it is slow accretion. A public reckoning. The club's owner issues a formal apology. The staff involved are placed on leave. Legal follow-through is measured. Fines, a regulatory review, civil suits for negligence initiated by parties affected. It is messy and sober, as legal things are. No cinematic punishment comes down like thunderbolt. Rather, systems apply a kind of bureaucratic pressure that is public in its own right. People lose jobs. Others are exposed. The ledger, again, demands accounting. Li faces reputational consequence. Magazines that once bankrolled her features now decline. Invitations dwindle. She posts a series of essays, attenuated, honest, sometimes defensive, on how identity and visibility operate. The internet is unkind and kind in equal measure. Some readers forgive, others remember. Reputation, she finds, is a mutable commodity. A quiet victory. Months later, an artisan fair opens, a modest affair in a converted warehouse where people sell crafted scarves and ceramics. Li stands behind a table helping a young designer position a display. She moves with a confidence rooted not in the hunger for attention, but in the satisfaction of being useful. The scene is low-key and warm. People who once looked down at her now ask for small services. She charges, she learns, she gives fair advice. There is the sting of being lesser known, but there is also the pleasure of work that makes things better. Mengfei, now settled into her liaison role, visits the fair on a quiet afternoon. She finds Li arranging a pop-up and pauses, then smiles. They exchange news about minor business triumphs and laugh at the absurdity of corporate emails filled with passive-aggressive subject lines. The conversation is not love story closure. It is an economy of mutual respect that neither had expected. Fu watches from a distance, then steps forward. He moves through the pop-up with a hesitant ease, bringing a thermos of tea that he knows Li appreciates. He and Mengfei exchange a look, less about what could be and more about what is, the continued development of trust. He Xilian looks at the two of them and feels something she has been denying, the possibility that desire can be reconstituted by different needs. She once wanted to be the object promised to another man because it meant a certain kind of being seen. Now she recognizes that being seen can mean different things, being recognized for competence, for generosity, for the unexpected ability to change. Desire morphs. Instead of being a demand she places on others, it becomes a motivation to refine who she is. Final reckonings. There are no neat endings. The workplace continues its rhythms. Promotions, breakups, new deals. Zhang Yuanyan finds herself in therapy booked after a forced HR intervention that asked her to reckon with the harm gossip can cause. She begins, awkwardly, to rebuild her professionalism in ways that do not require stepping on others. The grandfather keeps making decisions that ripple through the family, some small, some substantial, and the ledger of past favors never disappears. He Xilian, who once assumed a marriage certificate would make her life complete, learns that being remembered by the right people is not the same as being known. She begins to prefer being known in smaller circles who value different things: honesty, usefulness, the ability to help an artisan find a buyer. The city still values headlines, but she no longer arranges her days to chase them. Mengfei's career continues to rise, but not in a way that flattens her. She is given responsibilities that require diplomacy, patience, and an uncommon clarity. She refuses gifts that feel like bribes, and instead negotiates for contract terms that protect the small vendors Dong Yao works with. Her agency is visible in the choices she makes. The promotion is not a trophy, but a tool. Fu keeps his distance from facile romance. He values competence and ethics in business and in people. Over time, the relationship between him and Mengfei blossoms in a mundane, honest way. Lunches that end with papers left unfinished, small gestures of solidarity when things go wrong. It is a slow arc, not a cinematic sweep. They are careful not to remake each other into the fantasies of their pasts. Epilogue: The Cost and the Gift. One evening, months after the club incident, He Xilian sits alone in a small office that overlooks a city lights. She has a stack of ledgers in front of her, this time invoices for designers, drafts of contracts, and a plan for a small show to bring artisans into the city's market. The lights below blink like a constellation the city has borrowed. She sips tea that is warm but not indulgent. She thinks of the stamp, the way it once sounded like a verdict, and now sounds like an echo of a life that has been rerouted. She thinks of what it meant to be forgotten, and what it meant to remember herself. For years, she defined desire as being claimed by someone else, by marriage, by association, by public neediness. Now desire shapes differently. It is the desire to build, to be good at something, to be useful and to be seen for that usefulness. There are days when she feels the sting of what she gave up, the clean certainty of being promised something, the path that avoids messy accountability. She does not pretend those losses are trivial, but there is also a new hunger that tastes less like entitlement and more like appetite, an appetite for respect earned rather than purchased. She receives an invitation from a patron she thought would be a salvation. The note is polite, the prose smooth. They offer to reintroduce her to social circles that would give her visibility. He Xilian reads it, feels the old reflexes, the seductive pulse of immediate recognition, and then places the invitation in a drawer. She does not burn it. She does not reply right away. For the first time, the not responding feels like a form of power. In a late-night message, Mengfei writes to He Xilian a photograph of a ceramic bowl that sold at the fair. "Your help made a difference," she writes simply. He Xilian smiles, surprised the image could make her chest tighten. The tightness is not the old hunger, but something warmer, almost like gratitude. She replies, "Keep me informed." A final line. He had been promised to someone else, and the world remembered her differently. She was forgotten on paper, then pushed into a life that demanded invention. She chased desire in the bright rooms of nightlife and in the ledgers of high society, and found finally that desire could be repatterned. It arrived in small moments, a fair that sold out, a contract signed with fairness written into it,
an apology spoken in a corridor, and hand held at the right moment. She learned that being remembered is not a single stamp, but a series of small recognitions, and that the appetite for being known can be fed by honesty, not only by status. If this story made you wonder who deserves a second chance, or who should be forgiven, tell us in the comments. Which character do you think finds redemption, and who do you think still has lessons to learn?
If you want more stories like this one, subscribe and follow the playlist for the rest of the series.